Everybody, hope you're doing well. This is December 2021 and I'm going to continue my prediction for Australia for 2022. There is a part 1 where I've done a general discussion about which Australian chart I'm using for which date and why. I've done a little bit of background, discussed the character of Australia to give us a good whetted appetite for looking at the chart in more detail. So I know you've been looking forward to this. I'm preparing charts for most countries. Just want to say the Irish chart looks rather interesting, and I've already done Austria, but in light of circumstances, I know most of the people who watch my channel aren't really happy with the level of authoritarianism going on, and so you are looking for a particular slant, and I want to give you, a glimpse that astrology can give us on what's going on. So unfortunately, yes, in the Bitcoin world, things are rather subdued right now because of the Evergrande thing as well. But enough about that. Let's crack on with the chart. So there you go. That was the chart I called Australia 2. And that was for 1st January 1901. And I'm not going to be using that one. I'm going to be going straight on to the chart for 26 Jan 1788 in Sydney rather than Canberra. So you will remember that in 1967, Harold Holt, who was the Australian Prime Minister, went for a swim and disappeared, never to be seen again. I talked about that on the previous vlog. At the time, Pluto was directly conjunct the moon in Virgo, right up here on the cusp of the 9th house and in the 8th. At the same time, Uranus was in the latter degrees of Virgo, squaring the ascendant, and interestingly, Neptune was here in Scorpio squaring Saturn. So I'm quite interested because often there are assassinations associated with the Neptune square Saturn angle. So was he assassinated? Did he disappear? Did he want to disappear? There were a lot of rumors that he went and lived his life out in China because he was collected by a Chinese submarine. So even back in those days, there was a lot of talk of Australian politicians being in bed with the Chinese. So I might come back to something. I did have a lot of articles that I've put aside, but I thought we'll mainly discuss the chart. I'll review the articles on Australia another time. So what we've got here are the transits right now. So why I mention the disappearance of Harold Holt is right now we have Neptune, transiting Neptune, will soon be opposing Moon. So as I said, Pluto was conjuncting Moon when Harold Holt disappeared. Neptune will soon be opposing the Moon, and if you see in the solar arc chart, the Sun is conjunct Moon. So these are heavy impacts on the Moon. So I'm thinking they're going to get rid of Scott Morrison next year. He's not as on board as dear Danny Andrews, that appalling person. I cannot. He looks like the most, well, I don't know, I don't even want to describe it. That is not a person of any substance. He doesn't look like he knows what day it was. It's an appalling level of authoritarianism. The fines, the draconian measures, the abuse of human rights, the eroding of civil liberties, it's disgusting what's going on. Michael Gunn is appalling. Fortunately, Berejiklian's gone. We know she'll be replaced by someone worse. Now, Scott Morrison is the Prime Minister, but it seems under this scenario, the states have had a lot more power. He hasn't really done much. I think they'll get rid of him. Possibly not in a Chinese submarine, though, but just worth mentioning that. Okay, next interesting thing, you'll see Saturn transiting. Saturn is in Aquarius, roughly conjunct the Sun in the 1st. That's the authoritarianism by the state. 1st house is often about the nature of the country, the physical borders, the boundaries, it's kind of the image we have of the country, and the image we have of the country right now is very authoritarian. Now we have here Uranus in Taurus now throughout this year, and unfortunately for the rest of next year, we're going to have this uneasy tension going on where Saturn in Aquarius is squaring Uranus in Taurus. Now, it was particularly bad for Australia this year because the whole year, the tension between those two planets was affecting the Sun. Now, Saturn is quite at home in Aquarius because it's co-ruler of Aquarius. So Saturn is very powerfully placed, and Saturn has had quite a bad connotation in Aquarius throughout the centuries, being connected with famine, austerity. Uranus in Taurus was connected with World War II. That's when it was last in Taurus. And do you know, in 1942, there was a Saturn-Uranus conjunction in Taurus. It was around 29 degrees. But now, conjunctions, major conjunctions in Taurus are really a problem because we have the Pleiades and the latter degrees of Taurus. We have Argyle and all sorts of horrible fixed stars in Taurus, so it compounds the drama, the trauma. So I'm personally, in my chart, I was hoping Uranus would be bring change, variety, sudden opportunity, some spontaneity. Hasn't been able to at all because Saturn squaring it is quashing it, it's suppressing it. And I think that totally represents where we're at. We've got a certain group represented by Uranus who want freedom, truth, liberty, equality, fraternity, all those wonderful concepts. And we've got this Saturn, which is the imposition of more and more rules, regulations, authoritarianism, fines, austerity, the problems with the economy, and these forces vying against each other. And unfortunately, it's going on the whole of next year with these two planets not being able to move out the orb of one another. And as I say, Saturn was conjunct Uranus in Taurus, World War II, 1942. It's a horrible influence, and the similarities of what's going on now as they are squaring each other. And because they've got the sun of Australia in their crosshairs, that's why Australia has been central to it. However, because it's generally moving along a little bit, it'll be affecting countries with placements further into the fixed sign. So maybe affecting Australia less so next year, although it's affecting all of us on a social and international level, but it's also affecting us personally. It's causing an enormous amount of stress, tension, indecision, because you've got these, it's the stalemate. Right, on their side, they want to impose more, but they know the resistance is building as people are waking up. And on our side, we just like this huge impatience. When will this be over? Will we defeat them so we can continue with our lives? So I think it's interesting that Australia, which is bang center of this whole thing, has that particular really important square transit, Saturn, Uranus, going on. As you can see here, transiting Pluto is conjuncting Mercury, which is natally the last degrees of Capricorn opposite Uranus in the last degrees of Cancer. Now, when I talked about Australia's chart, they are a telecommunications powerhouse. That's one of their big industries. I am wondering, being in the first house there, if there's going to be some sort of attack, a cyber attacker, like Cyber Polygon, on their communications infrastructure sometime next year. So I'm thinking the agenda in Australia might shift to Cyber Polygon shutting down banking via a strike on the communications infrastructure. Now, which is possible because also Uranus is also very much about communications, modern communications, IT, satellite links, all that sort of thing, and that's over here. Just interesting, in its house of allies, you've got Uranus in Cancer, very much America, isn't it? Because America, Cancer country with moon in Aquarius, so there you go. Okay, so that's what interests me about Pluto. We've talked about Neptune, which is opposing the moon, could mean the end of Scott Morrison, a very different kind of leader coming in, perhaps one more and more compliant and along with the lines we want. I mean, as I've said before, there's no political solution. Every politician is now bad. Here we have Jupiter about to conjunct Saturn, Venus in the second house. So some financial boost going on for Australia. Is it that they're having a lot of inward investment because China, they're following the script so well? Could it be? And I know that there was a big article about the incredible wealth in minerals in the Northern Territory, particularly in the Aboriginal lands, which is why I think we see what's going on with the plight of the Aboriginal people in Northern Territory, being with the quarantine camps and all that. So let's go along to the solar arcs, which are very interesting. So here we have first solar arc Jupiter conjunct Sun. Now immediately I thought, wonderful, because Jupiter's the chart ruler, having an ascendant in Sagittarius. I thought this could be meaning an explosion of freedom, an increase in liberty, in justice in Australia, reclaiming its image as a outdoorsy, outgoing, fun-loving place. But then I began to think Jupiter also represents bankers, the moneyed elite, the powerful. The Sun represents similar, the nobility. Could it be an increase in their power? And in the first house, representing the state, does this indicate a massive increase in state imposition, state control, the encroachment of the state, more power to the state, more nanny state? Because the first house is also the house of the land, the actual land mass, the geography, the state. I'm also concerned because Jupiter has a connotation with weather, and so does the first house. So I was wondering if they're going to use some sort of major weather event, some weather bomb, directed energy weapons in the form of crazy weather to knock out the communications infrastructure, to impose another kind of cyber polygon on Australia. I think it's possible. So there's some hope there, but there's a double-edged sword to that. Yes, I think the spirit of freedom is rising in the people and the need to reclaim their land, but on the other hand, their power is also increasing. If you look here, the midheaven is conjunct Jupiter in the 6th. I talked about Jupiter retrograde in Mercury, in Gemini in the 6th, being a lot about the army. So I'm also concerned that that's an increase of military power and a foreign military on the soil, maybe UN troops, something like that. So that kind of worries me. Also, Jupiter in the 6th indicates increase in rules. It's also the house of health. So increased cases, spread, deaths, increased hype over a health thing. So I do see the health thing continuing as a way of a power grab, midheaven being connected with the party and power and government. So that's a little bit concerning. On the other hand, because Jupiter rules the ascendant, it could possibly represent something a little bit more positive as well in terms of Australia reclaiming its true nature. So if you saw those pictures, those were from my vlog that's on BitChute the other day, one of the slightly more edgy ones that you can't do on Taliban Tube. So just to go back to the solar arc directions as well, we see here the sun, very important planet in solar arcs, it's conjunct the moon. So it's almost like the starting of a totally new cycle, a new phase for Australia. So it's all up for grabs. I'm positive about this one in a way because the moon represents the people. So this could be an activation of the innate fighting spirit of the diggers, a desire to fight back. It's quite positive. However, the moon rules Cancer, which is intercepted in the 7th, which can also represent a foreign power. I do think this also means sun and moon, a new phase of Australia cooperating with China rather than with America. So new allies, that also could mean because of moon's rulership. So I say it's a whole new phase in Australian history, a new start. Will it be a positive new start for Australians? Okay. We also have the activation of Neptune by Venus and Saturn, which are beginning to solar arc towards Neptune. Worrying because this is a dissolution of the law, power, rights. Neptune being in the 9th seems to me a bit of a problem in terms of the whole legal system falling apart, being co-opted, being subverted, lies, conspiracy within the media. Okay, so sorry to sound a little bit negative on some of these. I was actually hoping that it would be a very positive reading. I see Uranus isn't doing much. Very interesting here. We have solar arc Mars, which is right between Saturn and Venus there. Saturn being sort of late 20s, oh gosh, so blurry on this one, 28 degrees roughly, yeah, 28 degrees of Aquarius, Venus being in 0 degrees of Pisces. Mars is triggering that. What does Saturn rule? Well, Saturn is intercepted in the 1st. That seems another attack on the land. So again, either maybe a weather attack or a physical attack. What I said about the foreign army, the attack on the infrastructure, I'm thinking, because Mars is here, it's in the house of the enemy, an enemy attack on the infrastructure. I'm not sure. That doesn't, to me, look that hopeful. If you look at Venus, it again rules the midheaven, which is slightly hopeful because I'm wondering there, Mars challenging the ruler of the midheaven, that could be some sort of national revolt, kind of rising up, challenging the leader. So I'm a little bit positive that Mars here is going to re-inject some energy. But again, a Mars conjunct Saturn and Venus, that's the resources. Huge increase in mining. They want that land because this is all about money. And I said there's an injection of wealth. I think that's all to do with the mining up in the Aboriginal land and the wealth within that region being released. That, by the way, was the solar arcs. And I'm going to go here to the April Ingress, which is set for Canberra. I will be doing a whole video on why Ingress charts are so fascinating, so important, and how comparing them to the Ingress charts for 2022 and 23 will give us vital clues to how we're going on this. Really interested here that Pluto is quite near the ascendant, representing a pivotal change of massive transformation for Australia. The fact that Uranus is here in Taurus in the fourth house is hope for the public making some sort of public uprising, not like a coup, but massive protests. That's very hopeful for the success of protests in shaking this whole thing up. But the problem is, the more you shake it up, the more authoritarian they get, and that is going to continue next year because of Saturn Uranus. We haven't overcome them yet, have we? You'll see here that a lot of planets in the first house. Now, again, we have this theme of first house, the land, the weather, the actual state. Again, wondering if there's going to be some sort of major weather calamity, controlled, of course, to knock out the infrastructure or something. Again, that could be the natural resources and the mining. But the fact that Pluto and Mars are so close to the ascendant indicates there's a high level of, I don't want to say it's going to cause violence, but some sort of violent activity. Could be violent weather, or the great heat and intensity of the protests is rising, and the whole situation is becoming more intense and much, much more volatile next year. If you note there, the ascendant is directly on the sun. It would, not on the sun here, but on the natal sun, which is early degrees of Aquarius. So again, the emphasis on the sun, meaning this is a vital and important year for the destiny, the spirit, and the reclaiming of this land. Now, one thing we don't have in this Ingress chart is any exact angles, which you usually need, as I will explain in my next broadcasts, for some really strong action. So, hope you enjoyed that, guys. Please look out for more of these coming. I'm going to do a little bit more on Australia when I cover the Ingress charts to explain more. So hang in there, and look forward to chatting to you all soon.